Again, it just seemed like heaven, so I did it. And do you remember back and forth? And we did together all day long. Do you remember us holding hands in each other's eyes? We stand. Tell me, do you remember the time when we fell in love? Do you remember the time when we first met, girl?
Ever since I can remember, actually, with my sister, because she's so much older than I am, and we slept in the same bed. So I recall him getting in the bed with us and doing the acts with her. And my mother would say sometimes, "Joe, not tonight."
Your mother knew?
Oh, yes, my mother was very much aware of it. And then there were times when my sister couldn't take it anymore, and she would ask my mother to go get help for him, psychological help. And she refused to do that. And eventually my sister just decided that she wanted to leave home, that she could not deal with it anymore, so she left home.
You're talking about... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's my sister, Ruby.
Right.
And that's when he started sexually abusing me, when she left home.
But you were very young when it started.
Very young, yes.
And how long did it go on?
It went on for a couple of years. It went on basically my entire life. I spoke to my mother about it a couple of years ago when I couldn't take it anymore. And I asked her for help. I said, "Mother, I need help. Please help me. I just want to know one thing. Why is he doing this to me? Why did he do these things?" And she answered me by saying, "Yes, your father did these things. He was sick at the time, but you're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to mention it, and don't you ever mention it again." And I called her again. I said, "But you don't understand. I need help. I need to know why. I need to know something. Please help me." Because you get to a point in your life where you can't cope anymore. You're thinking about it constantly. And I couldn't deal with it. And I kept reaching out for help because she was my best friend. So I turned to her for help. And she wouldn't do anything about it. And she kept saying, "If you ever mention this to the public, I will deny it. And I will call you a liar, and they won't believe you."
Let me just ask you, because I had read a quote from your husband, manager, Jay. He said you were repeatedly raped and that you're a very sad woman because of it. Is that a fair?
Well, at a young age, my father engaged in that with me when I was much younger. As I got older, no, because he could go out and get any girl he wanted. Right. However, sexually, verbally, it continued. He would say terrible things to me. We were alone in the room. "You know you want this. Come over here and get it." Things like that he would say to me as I was older. But younger, children don't have a lobby, so we can't say no. But as an adult, we have a choice to say yes or no. But even as an adult, I couldn't say no when he said things like that because my parents were so strict that we weren't allowed to really say no or anything. So I just had to listen to him talk to me like this, and I'll dare walk out the room. He'd grab me and beat me if I were to walk out the room while he's talking to me. So I just had to take these things from him.
How did it make you feel about yourself?
I had no self-esteem all my life. I felt dirty. I felt unclean. I felt guilty. I felt like I was doing something wrong. I felt like everybody out there knew, which in fact they couldn't have known because they weren't there. They weren't in the same bed with me and my father. But you just feel these things. I don't know if it's something that works on you mentally, emotionally, but you feel these terrible thoughts and you think them constantly. And it's a terrible feeling. And I just would continuously shake constantly, my entire body, and I couldn't control the shaking. I would have to put my hands down to stop the shaking all the time when I would think about what my father would do. But I kept it very quiet. It's something you don't discuss with other people, other members of the family, and I never did. Coming from a well-known family like I did, we were always in the media, and we had to smile and pretend like everything was okay, and that's exactly what we did. Even though it wasn't okay, it was terrible.
Have you forgiven your father?
My father, it's sort of a hard question to answer. When you say, have I forgiven him? I should probably answer you by saying that I blame my mother more than my father, because I think if any man who's sleeping with his daughter and the wife is standing there and she's part of my blood and he's not, and she allows him to do this to her daughter, something's wrong. Something's wrong with the man. How could she stay with him like that? This is her daughter. leave him. Like my sister asked, leave him, do something, go somewhere. But she chose not to. She chose to stay right there and watch him do that. Why, I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of reasons. Perhaps she would prefer to see him with the daughters than another lady on the street.
Called it a highly dysfunctional family, although on the surface it seemed like the American dream.
Yes, of course, naturally. In our family, because that was always that facade up there, smiling in front of the cameras, but when we got home, it was totally different. It was an entirely different lifestyle at home.
Well, what was it like at home?
It was very, very hard. My father was very strict. He beat us.
Well, when you say he beat you, did he spank you, whip you? I mean, what
He
are you
had a belt, you say in the book. Belts, whips, whatever. My brothers were grown, and my father would take his fist and he would punch them and knock them down the steps constantly.
Would they provoke him?
To this day. No, of course not. To this day, they are still afraid of my father, and they will tell you. They come to me and they say, Latoya, we have kids in college, and we're afraid of my father still today. But my mother allowed this to go on, which makes it so bad. She didn't stop it.
She, too, was an abuse victim, wasn't she?
My mother, by my father, according to my brother, yes. According to Michael, he would tell me he would see my father beating my mother. I had never seen my father beat my mother. But he beats all of us.
So did this persist all through your childhood and continue into young adulthood?
Adult, everything. I mean, Michael was doing, I think it was Off the Wall, Thriller, and he was still getting beat, but what you guys see is him up on the awards, accepting these awards, and smiling. My father's chasing him around the house, and he's running from him, terrified.
You said that Michael was the only one that actually tried to fight back and tried to hit your father.
He was a little boy, yes. He was the only one. I don't think he knew exactly what he was doing. But the more he would get beat, he'd throw it back at him and throw a string. He would have to always get the last lick in, always.
What's been the reaction of your family to this book?
I have no idea. My parents, of course, they're denying it. And, of course, typical that they would deny it. Denial is the first sign of dysfunctional and abuse as well. However, outsiders have accepted the book, and they understand. They understand about the abuse. There wasn't just physical abuse, it was also mental abuse, which is very disturbing, and also sexual abuse as well.
That you don't write about in the book. You allude to it, that your sister really left.
I touch it very lightly, because it's a very touchy subject, and it's dealing with my sister, and I wasn't able to talk about myself just yet. You have to be ready to come out and talk about these things. And it's a very sad story, because Riri is a wonderful person, I must say, and she left home at a very young age. She left home when she was, I think it was 16 years old. And the reason she left is because my father would get out of the bed with my mother, and he would get in the bed with Riri. And Riri would ask my mother, please, mother, get help for him. And she wouldn't. She would not. So Riri had to leave home. There were times, of course, when my mother would say, Joe, not tonight. Leave her alone. Let her rest. Don't get in the bed with her. And then Riri called me, and she said to me, she says, Latoya, I have a question I want to ask you. I said, what is it, Riri? And she said, when I left home all these years, now this is just recent, all these years I wondered if Joseph ever sexually abused you the way he did me. Was it happening with you and Janet? And I couldn't answer her. And she says, please tell me, and I wouldn't. It's things that you don't talk about. And she says, Latoya, you have to tell me. And I said, Riri, there are just certain things you don't talk about, isn't there? And she says, okay, I understand. And that's when she asked me about Janet, and I said, I don't know what happened to Janet.
Well, what about you, Latoya? Did he sexually abuse you?
Yes, he did. Very badly,
Do you think he did Janet?
I don't know. She's never spoken about it. I certainly hope he didn't. She has never spoken about it. My father, it began with me when Riri left, and then it started with me.
So when did you decide that you were going to talk about it?
You live with this all your life, and you feel that you're doing something wrong, and you're frightened when this is happening to you. And you're embarrassed. I have been embarrassed all my life to ever talk about it, to mention it, shy, afraid that people can see through me and see that this is happening.
You felt like your family's living a lie all these years.
Well, they have been living a lie, definitely. But the disturbing and hurting part about it all is that my mother never did anything about it, and I wanted her so badly to say, Latoya, is he bothering you? Is he touching you? Did he touch you? I would direct questions to her and throw them at her, leaving it open so she could say, Latoya, did he ever touch you?
Why wouldn't she leave him then? If it's
that's what Riri would always say, Mother, and Riri would tell me, I don't know why Mother didn't leave him. And you got to think, sometimes I say, is it because there are so many children? No, it wasn't that. Because after a while, everybody was old enough.
You've never asked your mom that?
Yes. She has no answer to it.
Is this the first time you've heard from them?
I've heard that letter before.
No, you haven't. They're sending it out to everybody before
everybody has this letter. Before I go on to show my parents in this letter out. Again, that's a sign of just wanting to deny everything. And it hurt so bad when I was on another program and my family, my parents actually, I should say, denied everything. Everything. If they would just come out and speak out and tell the truth, it would help so many other people. And that's the reason for writing this. I feel that I'm going to reach out and help other people who have been abused. Because you don't understand, but once you're abused, it affects you terribly. This goes on, and you live with it, and you live in shame. And you can't really speak out because you're afraid. And finally you get courageous enough to do it. And then you do.
And then you feel like the world's turning on you because you've been courageous?
Yes, because you're doing it. Yes, it's like they don't want to hear it. But it exists, and you have to accept it. And don't be afraid to speak out if you're being abused. It's a terrible thing.
I called it a highly dysfunctional.
Do you remember that one night when we fell in love? What we had felt so right, 'cause we had trust. Now it's drowning in our lives. I know we're broken up, you know the feelings deep inside. So what's you, what we've been through?